Hey everybody, Sweet Beats here with Sweet Beats Tech Stop. It probably says something about me that I am nerding out on patch bays, but I am, and wanted to show you these patch bays that I got, which I think are great. So first of all, a couple of things about patch bays. Patch bays are a way for you to conveniently access jacks, sources, loads that would otherwise be difficult to get to for convenient redirecting, reconnecting. Think of if you had a little console, a little mixing console, and it didn't have enough inputs for full tracking and mix down simultaneously. So you're having to repatch things like connect the outputs of a recorder to the console when it's time for mix down with, maybe additional sources that you're mixing in during mix down. A patch bay, rather than having to do that at the back of your console, allows you to do it here, in the face of a rack or whatever is more accessible. The other thing that it does is it does normaling. So if you have an output that's connected to this top jack and a load that's connected to the bottom jack, you can have those normaled so that when nothing is plugged in, those two are connected together. But if you plug into the top, say that source, now it breaks the connection, and then you can plug into a different load. So it's patch bay. For those of you that have been around long enough, the old telco patch bay, where they would connect your call to the person that you were wanting to talk to. So, and then there's also half normaling, so full normal is where they're connected when nothing's plugged in, and it breaks that connection whether you plug into the top jack or the bottom jack of the pair. Half normal is where they're connected when nothing's plugged in, and they're still connected when you plug into the top jack. So you can sniff the source, still have this normaled, like it's going from, a group out on your console to a track on the recorder, but you also want to double that and monitor that somewhere, or you're doing a safety backup while you're doing your recording. And then non-normaled or isolated is when these are not connected to each other. There's no normaling. So patch bays come in a variety of jack types. Pretty much any kind of jack that you might find in the audio world, you can find a patch bay for that type of jack. And patch bays are not just for audio, they're also for video, they're also for data. But in the analog studio here, we have just these audio patch bays. Now, my console has a lot of inputs and quite a lot of outputs as well. And they're all in the back on the back plane, and they're crammed back there, and I don't want to be doing a lot of repatching. The way that the console modules are configured and the number of recorders and things that I have here, that would be terrifically inconvenient. So I'm wanting to get everything on a patch bay, and so for the sake of the patch field and the real estate, I like the tiny telephone or bantam type jacks. Some people get confused. These are not 1/8" TRS. These are not 1/4" TRS. In fact, they are a different style with more of a ball nose. These are a miniature version, a tiny telephone, tiny version of the old school telephone long frame 1/4" patch cables. And jacks. It's a different kind of plug than a phono plug or a phono TRS, 1/4" TRS or TS. It's about 3/16 of an inch in diameter. It's not exactly that, but it's tiny telephone size. And so in the TT patch bay, you can get 96 jacks per one rack unit of a patch bay. That's about the densest I've seen. I think there are some variations on that, but this is pretty standard, 48 jacks top, 48 jacks bottom. And I found these cool patch bays. These are the ADC CommScope brand Pro Patch. There are a number of different types of patch bays and backplane configurations you can get in their Pro Patch series in a couple of different levels. These things were I think the list price when they were new, 5-10 years ago, it's like $1,400 to $1,600. I found a screaming deal new in original sealed packages on these, and so I bought a set, what I needed here. I actually got 6. I need 5 for all my jacks and all my connections, and then a spare that's going to stay in the box unless I need it, and that will go down here. The cool thing about these is with patch bays, depending on how complex your setup is, there are grounding considerations, not only chassis grounding, as well as shield grounding, and then do you want normaling or half normal? A lot of patch bays in the TRS, quarter-inch TRS variety, might have modules that you can flip around and change from isolated to normaled. There are also a number of patch bays that even have switches on the top to switch in sections or even per jack pair between half normal, normal, isolated. But grounding is always a consideration too, and having to isolate things from rack rails and deal with that sort of thing. The thing that's cool about these is that, well, there's several things that are cool about them, but one of the things that's cool is each of these slide out. Hang on 1 second here. Hard to do with one hand. Here, let me do this one. Okay, so each of these jack modules slide out, and there are dip switches on them. Here, there's a series of dip switches to convert them from normal to half normal to isolated. No bust grounds, bust shields isolated from the chassis, or shields bust and strapped to the chassis. So these things can drop into any installation and be ready to configure to the grounding scheme of the installation. And in my case, I do not want the audio shields connected to the chassis, but I do want all of the audio shields strapped, because then I'm connecting those to central grounding. So that's the way I'm doing my studio, and you can do that with these and drop them in and not have to rewire things or try and source, specific patch bays. These will configure to whatever you need. The other thing is that all of the contacts and the backplane contacts of these little modules, the contacts in the dip switches, they're all gold plated. Now, some of you might think, yeah, that's all hype. It doesn't really matter. But what I can tell you is for somebody like myself that has a number of very vintage devices, even, as old as almost 50 years old, my 2-inch 16-track recorder, and even this console, which is now about 25 years old, the gold contacts, whether it's edge connectors, backplane connectors, they don't oxidize like tin or, nickel or even silver. So knowing that these will last. These patch bays also on the back plane. So remember, you can have different styles of jacks on the front interface. There are also different styles of connections on the back. You might have solder link, and have to solder your studio wiring in. There are different types of punch down panels. ADC made a QCP, what they called QCP. I think that stood for Quick Connect Panel, and a special type of punch down tool, audio grade punch down connections. And then of course you might have jacks on the back like on the front. But density is a problem when you're cramming 96 balanced connections in a one rack unit package. These connections are called, it's an Elco or EDAC E3 connector. So it's just a 3-pin EDAC connection. I bought the crimping tool. I have the connectors. That's the thing that's cool about these patch bays that I found, is that each of them new and sealed and comes with all of the E3 housings, all of the EDAC pins that you need. They even have these cool little things, little plastic markers that you pop in so you can quickly and easily visually tell what's half normal, what's normal, and what's isolated. So anyway, you can get on the web, but if you look for E3 housings and EDAC crimp pins, this is like $100 to $150 just for these parts, and they came with the patch bay. So, and the reason I like the E3 connections is that if you need to reconfigure something or move it, you don't have to desolder, you don't have to yank punches. You simply unplug and move it to the different spot. I know that sounds just as simple as unplugging a 1/4-inch TRS connection, but for 96 jacks per patch bay, if you were going to do that on a 1/4-inch TRS phono type patch bay, it would take up a lot more rack real estate. And I don't think they last as long or have as good a contact as even the TT Bantam type connections. This is a more professional setup. So anyway, again, nerding out on patch bays, but I just thought that these were super cool, that they can be configured, easily reconfigured. You don't have to take the patch bay out of the rack if you need to switch something from half normal to full normal or isolated. Pop the module out, click the switches, pop it back in. Or if you need to do a partial or wholesale reconfiguration of your patch field, the backplane affords easily being able to do that with the E3 connectors. And again, this is all gold plated. Everything is gold plated, and the crimp pins are gold plated. So that's my patch bay nerding. I'm going to get back to putting this last one in there.